Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Overwatch League 2019 Power Rankings video, the final videos in the 2019 Fan Thoughts and Analysis lineup of videos. These two videos, of course, are going to be my Power Rankings for the end of the 2019 season. We're not focusing on the 2020 season yet. That'll be later on down the road. We're going to focus solely right now on the end of the 2019 season. So this power ranking can be based on where the teams were when we last saw them compete, or just where they were at the end of the season for the 2019 season. Now, what that means at the end of the day is that things like season playoffs, season play-ins, stage 4 are going to be the most important things to determining where these teams end up in this rankings. It's a comprehensive thing at the end of the day, so I may put some teams higher than some others if they were a better team throughout the whole season, even if they didn't have a great stage 4. If they were if they were just a little better in general, throughout the season, that may give them a bit of a boost. If they were much more consistent throughout the season, that may give them a boost, or that may hurt them. It's all kind of, it's very subjective, obviously. So people are going to disagree with me. People may not disagree with whatever it is. We'll see what it is. This is part 1, of course, as I mentioned. This will be covering spots 20 through 11 in detail. So I think we should just jump into this, and you'll see how things are going as we go along. So at number 20, I have the Boston Uprising. Boston Uprising finished the season with an 8-20 minus 37 record. Obviously, they did make Stage 1 playoffs, if you do remember that. But their last win as a team was on June 23rd. And they've made changes, of course. They brought in Stellar after he came out of retirement. He came to the Boston Uprising. They brought on a new head coach at the end of the season. After the season was over, they brought on Mineral. So obviously, we've seen that they're making some changes and doing some stuff going forward. But this is a team that made Stage 1 playoffs. Fell a little shy of where people thought they might be come Stage 2. And then in Stages 3 and 4 went 1-13. They didn't win it all in July. They didn't win it all in August. I think that really hinders the Boston Uprising, because they're not the only team, of course, that had one win in the last 2 stages. But the thing that hurts Boston Uprising in particular is that they're in the Atlantic Division. The Atlantic Division is the weaker of the 2 divisions, or was the weaker of the 2 divisions throughout the 2019 season. So when you can only win 1 game in the weaker division, it's a bit of a problem looking at your team and saying, okay, we managed to win 1 game after we had a very strong start to the season. We looked like we were getting things together, we were getting things going, we were doing pretty well, and then ended this way. Yeah, they're the first team to lose the Shanghai Dragons, and now they are the team that I have at the bottom of my power rankings. They didn't impress me very much. I think they need to make some changes to this roster. I think you're good with your main tank infusions. I think you're good with color hex. I think they probably need to make a change at main support, flex tank. They probably will want to add another DPS player, though I think Color Hex, Stellar, and Blase were pretty good for them. I don't think they were the main problem throughout the season. I really think it's a new flex tank, a new main support is the things that they really need to improve upon. But Boston Uprising, disappointing season. That is why they are here at number 20. Number 19, I have the Toronto Defiant. They were 8-20 minus 33 for their season record. They did make the Stage 1 playoffs. They were 5-2 in Stage 1. They looked very good. They have gotten rid of Bishop as their head coach, so not a great look there. That was before the season had ended. And if I remember correctly, they were also a team that went 1-13 in the last 2 stages. They went 0-7 in Stage 3, and I believe they went 1-6 in Stage 4. So not great for them. But their win did come later in the season than the one that we saw from the Boston Uprising. Now, Toronto Defiant are a weird team. Obviously, they went from a purely Korean roster initially. They moved over to a mixed roster with a lot of non-Korean players. You have, obviously, Gods and Sharik were playing a lot. Mangachu was playing a lot. Logic was playing a lot. Really, Neko and Aid were the only two players really on the team that were Korean at the end of the season. So it's interesting just seeing where the Toronto Defiant went late in the season. Very different team. I would assume they have to make some changes. It's the kind of thing with a team like Toronto that's very weird, is that they made a lot of changes during the season, and then it didn't really work out. So you wonder, well, do we get rid of a lot of these players? Do we just completely overhaul the roster again? Or do we try to build around what we just did at the end of the season and see if that works? I don't really know what their plan is. I don't really know what they go for. It's it's an interesting team, the Toronto Defiant. I don't really know what to expect from them going forward, but I wasn't super impressed with them late in the season. They did manage to beat Shanghai in Stage 4, which was, at the time, pretty impressive, but then it kind of got overshadowed by some other big upsets. That was a crazy week that week. So it's tough to really say for sure what the Toronto Defiant did poorly, that I think like needs to definitely change. I think they just didn't have it going. They probably need to make some changes, maybe at main tank. Um, I thought their damage was good with Mangachu and Logics. Main tank play wasn't the best. Coordination, I think, wasn't the best at the end of the day. I think this team, they just need to give them more time, let them play more, um, bolster the roster a little bit, and they'll probably be better. But they were not a very impressive team late in the season, and that's why I have them at 19. At 18, I have the Dallas Fuel. Dallas Fuel had a 10-18 minus 27 record for the season. They managed to make the Stage 2 playoffs, but uh, after that, their season was very, very bad. They won their last game of Stage 3, or their last game of Stage 2. They won their first game of Stage 3, and then they didn't win a single game the rest of the season. The last one was on June 9th. Now, the reason why I put the Dallas Fuel above the Toronto Defiant and the Boston Uprising, despite having gone that long without a single match win, is two main reasons. One, the Dallas Fuel are in the Pacific Division. They're in the harder division, so they played a lot of tougher opponents. The other thing is they looked decent at times. We saw them almost beat New York in Stage 3. That was a very close match. They're a team, I think, that just in general is a stronger opponent than what we saw from Boston and Toronto throughout the season. Uh, there was a point in time where they looked very, very good. There was a point in time where they were one of the top teams in the league. They just crumbled and fell apart as the season kind of progressed. It's a thing that happens a lot. I think this is a team that probably needs to make a lot of changes. I don't think they made enough changes after last season because they got kind of um, shocked, or they got false hope because they had a strong Stage 4 back in 2018. So then comes 2019, they're like, we don't need to make a lot of changes because our team's in a good spot, and then it turned out they weren't. I definitely think damage is the spot where they need the most help. I think Zachary's a fine player. I just don't think he was ever really able to play his strengths, and then I just think that the team never really looked all that great anyway. I think their tank line's fine. I think their tank line isn't a problem. Their support line, maybe some changes. I think Unco's fine. Closer, maybe you could do a better support than Closer. We'll see, I guess, as it goes forward. The Dallas Fuel were not a super impressive team to me personally. Late in the season, I don't think many people were impressed with them late in the season. When you go that long without a win, it's pretty bad. Um, there's not a lot to say. I think that last win on June 9th really is the killer for the Dallas Fuel. They just didn't look very good. They had problems winning fights, and I think you need to make a coaching change potentially as well. We'll see what happens with this team. They're a very weird team. We'll see what happens with them. I don't really know what to expect for a lot of these teams in the offseason. Some teams obviously are going to make a lot of big changes. Some probably won't. But the Dallas Fuel, I think, are a team that need to consider making some changes to this roster if they want to be able to compete next season. Because they are in a very tough division next season. And they, right now, are the absolute least favorite team to win their division next season. Just based on how tough their division is. Coming up next, number 17, I have the Houston Outlaws. And the Houston Outlaws had a 9-19 minus 22 season record. Obviously, if you remember, they made Stage 3 playoffs. They had a very surprising run in Stage 3 to to look pretty good. But Stage 4, they did not manage to live up to what people had thought they might be able to do, and they did not make the season play-in or season playoffs. They did part ways with their head coach, Tae-rong, and also Hyun-woo, who is one of the other coaches for the team. So this is a team that has obviously already shown they're going to make changes. There's a rumor that they have new ownership, but the new owner has never officially been announced by either the league or the team, or the owner himself that is rumored to be the new owner. So we'll have to wait and see if that ever actually comes true. But the Houston Outlaws obviously had a pretty strong Stage 3. Didn't work out super well, though, at the end of Stage 4. And a thing that a lot of people will bring up, a lot of the analysts, a lot of the people in the league will bring up, is that the Houston Outlaws just need people who actually care about the team, who give them the resources they need to succeed, who focus on actually caring about the team. Because from everything we know, Optic did not care about the Houston Outlaws that much. They didn't really put an emphasis on the Houston Outlaws as a team, and we kind of see what's happening with Optic now. The person who founded Optic, Hex, sold the team to Immortals. He moved on to NRG. So there's clearly some stuff going on there with Optic. Houston Outlaws were not getting the support and the love from the parent organization that a lot of these other teams were. And I think that was a big part of why the Houston Outlaws are struggling as much as they were. Do they need some roster changes? Of course. I think mainly you kind of have to look at your support line and your tank line. I think Muma's fine. I don't think Muma's the problem. I think you should I just tried to say get and add at the same word. I think you should add another main tank just in case. But I definitely think flex tank is where they need to look. And I think that their support line, they need to look at improving. I don't think Raucus and Boink and Bonnie are necessarily bad players, but I think you can do better if you add some players. There's obviously some players out there that are available. Tons of players and contenders. There's going to be some Overwatch League players that become free agents. The Houston Outlaws, potentially also, now that they're without a head coach, could be on the D-Pay watch list. The LA Gladiators head coach, whose contract expired. He could rejoin the LA Gladiators, but he has looked or decided to look at other teams as well. So the Houston Outlaws are a team that definitely could be one of those teams who look to get D-Pay. But at the end of the day, the Houston Outlaws, very interesting team to kind of look at going forward. A team that I expect some changes going out of, but they did have a decent season at the end of the season. The second half was definitely better than the first half, but it still wasn't good enough to get them into the season playoffs, and their season did fall flat. But a team that I definitely think has the potential and the promise to be much better going forward. Number 16, I have the Paris Eternal. An interesting team because I don't really have a lot of notes on this team. Their record for the season was 11-17 minus 21. Not that weird. And the interesting thing is they were the only team to have a losing record every single stage, which is bizarre. At least I believe they had a losing record every single stage, which would make sense because they only, in 4 stages, they only managed to get 11 wins. So the thing with the Paris Eternal that I think is the most interesting is you look at this team, they looked good in a lot of cases at the start of stages and then kind of fell apart as the season progressed. And what I think really the Paris Eternal needed to do, in my opinion, the thing that they really needed the most was change in the tank line. I don't think their tank line was that good. And I think that's really where they fell flat as a team. I think their support line was just fine. Cruz and Hip and Gray, mainly Cruz and Gray, very good players. Their DPS with Soon and Shadowburn and Nico and Danye, also very good. Not the best in the league, but still good. Could you bolster those up, add a couple players, maybe add another support, maybe add another damage player? Yes, definitely. They already have 10 players on this roster, so that's kind of where you need to back up a second because you have to make some changes to this tank line. I was never impressed by Ben Best. I was never impressed by LH Cloudy. And Finzi was okay. He was fine at times. I think you could add another one and maybe bolster that a little bit. But main tank is where this team really struggled because you're talking about a meta like GOATS where the main tank is super important. and they never really lived up to the expectations and the hype because they didn't have a great main tank. Every stage we saw them switching. They were like, one stage we have Ben Best as our main tank, then another stage we have LH Cloudy, then another stage we have Ben Best, another stage we have LH Cloudy. They were just switching their roster up way too much. They never really had a set in stone tank line, with the exception of Finzi, because Finzi is the only flex tank they had. And they would switch between Hip and Gray at times. This team never really had a set roster that they used every single stage. They were always changing things. And it just got to a point where I was very worried about the way this team had decided and focused on doing things. The way that they worked was very interesting. The way that they built this team obviously was they built it as a purely European team, which isn't the weird thing. What is the weird thing is that they built this team with main tanks that I don't think were very good. There's definitely some main tanks out there you can look at. You can look at Numlocked. Not the best main tank out there, but he's an option. He's a European main tank that is out there that I definitely think they should look at. You could obviously try to get some other main tanks from some of the teams that are already in the league, but I just think this team was not that great because I think they struggled mainly in their tank line and some other spots, as well, from sometimes maybe not having the best DPS players who basically need to be playing well to do their job. They need to be kind of peaking, and they're not always doing that. So the Paris Turnover team that I definitely think need to make some serious changes, especially to their tank line. But at the end of the day, they are who they are, and we'll see what happens as we get further on into the offseason. Number 15, the team I'm sure everyone's been waiting to hear me say the name of, is the Florida Mayhem. The Florida Mayhem. Florida Mayhem here at 15. Obviously, they had the worst record in the league at 6-22 minus 39, but they had a very good stage 4. I believe they were 4-3 or 5-2 in stage 4. So they had a very good stage record. They rebuilt their roster late in the season, and we saw how the roster that was rebuilt ended up working very well late in the season. They added a bunch of new players to this team late in the season, obviously. They added Rain, they had a DPI Gargoyle, Korean, they had a new head coach in Unred, they had KH1 and Ryu joined the coaching staff. So this is a team that went up to 12 players. They have 12 players right now. Sorry about that. And this team is very, very, very improved from where we saw them at the beginning of the season and the middle of the season to the end of the season. They were one of the better teams in the league in stage 4, which was surprising a lot of people, I think. And we saw that they actually could compete. The addition of Fate was a huge addition. There's some things, of course, I think they need to change. I think Swan and Zephyr are two players who have to go. I just don't think they're that great as players. I don't think they were ever really that impressive, and I think that they would be better off if they didn't rely on some of these players who are just not that great. They have Fate, right? They have they have Korean, they have Gargoyle. They don't need Zephyr and Swan anymore because they have their flex tank in Gargoyle. Yes, you could get another one. I don't think Zephyr is your option to keep as your backup. You have Fate and Korean, so you don't need another main tank. Their support line, they have Rain, they have Byram, they have they have Hagopun, they have Chris. So they have a lot of players there. They have everything they need, really. They have like everything that they need to succeed. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Rain replace Chris in the main roster, because if you're running Rain and Gargoyle and DPI, because DPI is also a flex player, so that's something you got going on there too. He plays some Diva, but he plays some Widowmaker too. He can do a little bit of everything, so that's why he's a useful player as well. You have a lot of different things on this Florida Mayhem roster that actually look pretty good, which is a surprising thing I never would have thought I would say 2-3 months ago. But now we're here where we have a team that actually looks pretty solid. I think that the Florida Mayhem are a team that are actually in a very good position to succeed. They looked solid at the end of the season. You give them more time to build this up, and I think they'll look a lot better when we get into the 2020 season. This is a team I'm excited to see how they look going into the future. They have a lot of really good pieces. They have a 12-player roster. I expect 2, maybe 3 players to get cut, and them to bring in some more players maybe to help with this roster. But I think this is a team that going forward will be very solid. This is a team that we can expect to see potentially have a really strong run in a division that I think is pretty much up for grabs when they have a division where they're playing with Atlanta, Washington, Philadelphia, and Houston. It's not the best division, so anyone's really able to win that, and I'm excited to see where this team goes going forward, because I definitely think they could be a surprisingly good team. Next, of course, we have number 14, which is the Washington Justice, another team who didn't have the best record throughout the season. They were 8-20 minus 33, but they had a 6-1 record in Stage 4. Their only loss was to the Atlanta Reign, and they looked pretty good. Now, their roster, of course, has been changing. They've been adding players. They added, why can't I think of their names? Lulsish and Elivote late in the season. They were never able to actually play because they didn't get their visas in time, but they will be around for the 2020 season, and they are definitely going to be a really big help to this team. Sansam and Jonas looked okay in Stage 4, but they didn't look amazing. I was never impressed with them really anyway. Sansam had some strong moments. Jonas was one of the weaker players, in my opinion, throughout the season. I didn't think he was that great in the 2018 season. Didn't think it was that great in the 2019 season. You add Lulsish and Elivote. Those are huge additions for your tank line. You have Corey and Stratus, who were incredible in their role at the end of the season. What's interesting, of course, is you have Ark, who has said that his contract is up, but he could still return. We don't know if he will or not. If they want to build a mixed roster still, ooh, that was bad. If they want to build a mixed roster still, Ark is super important to that. Ark speaks very good English. You kind of need someone who can speak good English if you want to be able to have a mixed nationality roster of Korean and English speakers or just Western speakers. So I think he's a very important player to this team. I think he's a very good player. It's just a question of how does Ark want to play, right? Because obviously this coaching staff is now gone. And I think part of the reason why he came was because of the coaching staff. I think he liked Wizard Young, and he also was he was friends with Jonas. He's very good friends with Jonas, so he wanted to play with his teammate, his former teammate. So it's a team that looked very good at the end of the season. The thing is, I have a lot more questions about this team with the way that they're changing their coaching staff and with the moves that they're making. They had a very solid DPS play at the end of the season. Is that going to be enough, though, to get them to that point where they're still a dominant team in the league? I don't know. They had a very strong Stage 4. Will they be able to keep that up going forward? We have yet to see. We didn't see them in a double barrier meta where Hanzo and Widowmaker which was the Heroes of Corey would really shine on. You couldn't really run them in the double barrier meta. You could run them very well in the initial roll lock meta, but not really in the meta that we saw in the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see where the Washington Justice go going forward. But I thought they had a very strong end of the season. They looked very good, and I think that they were so good at the end of Stage 4 that what they did in the earlier parts of the season were pretty much irrelevant. So that's that. Next, move on to number 13. We start getting into the playoff teams, the play-in tournament teams, in fact. This is the Philadelphia Fusion. Now, Philadelphia Fusion had a 15-13 minus 3 overall season record. They made the season play-in tournament, and they made the Stage 1 playoffs. Beyond that, their season was pretty lackluster. They never really looked like the same team that got second in the season playoffs back in 2018. And we obviously saw this team make some changes throughout the season, adding some new players, trading away some players, But their roster's pretty small. They only have 8 players: Carpe, EQO, Snillo, Poco, Sato, Boombox, Neptuno, and Kib. This is a team I think needs to make some changes in various points in their roster, various parts of their roster. Because the thing is, right, Snill is a two-way player. He wasn't going to really play all that much anyway, ever. Elk is also a two-way player, but he was inactive for various reasons. So where it gets interesting is you have a team that you basically had one reserve player the entire end of the season. That was Kip in Stage 4 after they traded away Fraggy. This is a team, I think, that the thing they need the most is a new main tank. I don't think Sato is very good. I don't think he was up to par with what he could have been or what people expected of him. So I think that a main tank is number one thing they need to look at. I think the support line is one of the other interesting things. Boombox, I've never been that impressed with Boombox. He's had some strong moments. He's had some really good matches. But at the end of the day, I really don't think he's the best player in that role, and I think they can do a lot better. So I'd be interested to see if they add somebody. There's a bunch of really good players on Fusion University. Fusion University is a really good team. When they were in NA contenders, of course, they were dominating. They had to move to the Korean contenders because their team had too many Korean players on it. But Alarm is a very good flex support player on Fusion University who is 18. I don't believe he turned 18 early enough to be eligible for the 2018 season. But very good team, very good player that I definitely think the Fusion University or that Fusion will probably look to promoting. And I think that's really where they need to look for their team as a whole. They have said many times that it is their Korean or it's their contenders team, which is largely made up of Korean players that they have been looking at. And they have a lot of really good players who they have on their team. They have some players on loan, like Who Are You and Car. Obviously, like I said, they have Elk on this team. They have Snillo on a two-way contract. But I think Alarm is really the place to look at for where they are going to potentially add a new flex support, or if they're going to add a new main tank. I think any moves they're going to make, I think they will make by adding players from Fusion University. And I think that will help them out a lot. This is a team that will probably have some other changes that go down. They might get a new head coach, and we might see some changes there. But I think at the end of the day, this is a team that will definitely make some changes in different ways. But I think that they should look to Fusion University to bolster their roster going forward. But I don't think they were that great throughout the season. They looked just kind of average and okay all season. And that's really where they are in this list for me. They never really impressed me at any point throughout the season. Especially as the season progressed, they just kind of looked more and more average as the season progressed. And that is why I have them at 13. Next, number 12, I have the Chengdu Hunters. A team that went 13 and 15 minus 11. They made the season play-ins. And of course, one of the big things is that they have Leave, a player who will be eligible next season, who was not eligible to play this season, but they signed him for next season. And Leave is a very good player who they have for next season. Obviously, not what I'm talking about in this list, but definitely an interesting thing to look at there. This is a team that I was never super impressed with all season. A lot of people really, really liked them. I never really cared too much about them. But they definitely had some very strong performance throughout the season in different points throughout the season. They had obviously that one really good match against the Vancouver Titans back in Stage 1 that had people kind of looking at Among and going, oh, Among's actually like good at more than just one hero. And I think we saw some really interesting play from Among, and this is a team that played such a unique and interesting style that kind of worked, but at the end of the day, it didn't really work. You know, they won a game here and there. They beat New York 4-0. They beat San Francisco. They would get some of these wins every so often, but it didn't really lead to anything. And that, to me, is just kind of the question of, was it really worth it, right? They never really did anything super spectacularly. They didn't really impress in terms of the season standings ever. They barely made the season play-ins. They scraped by because they got lucky, basically, that the LA Valiant struggled as much as they did early in the season, and then they couldn't beat the Gladiators or the Shock at their homestand, and they lost too many games early, or they lost too many map fives. And that was basically why the Chengdu Hunters made the play-in tournament. I don't think they should have made the play-in tournament. I think the play-in tournament would have been a lot more entertaining if the Chengdu Hunters didn't make it. This is a team that I don't know what they're going to make changes of. I've seen a lot of people say that there's rumors that like half of this roster are retiring from Overwatch League. So I don't know what to expect. I don't know what is true and what is not. This is a hard team to really compare to other teams because they're so different from every other team because they don't play the same style that every other team plays. I don't know what to expect for this team going forward. They're an interesting team. They're a weird team. At the end of the day, I just think this is a team that will probably see a decent amount of change going forward. I couldn't tell you exactly what those changes will be, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some changes in different ways. Maybe they try to have a team that's a lot more normal, but with the way we saw this team play, I don't know if they will be able to be a title contender unless we see some major changes to this roster before we get into 2020. But we'll see. Very weird team. I don't really know how to describe this team and rank this team because it is a weird team. So, yeah. So that is my number 12 team. Finally, for this video, we have my number 11 team, and that is the Los Angeles Valiant. They went 12-16, -5 on the season. They made the Stage 3 playoffs, barely missed out on the season play-in tournament. I thought they looked very good late in the season. I really was impressed with the LA Valiant. I thought they were one of the best teams late in the season, but they just had too tough of a schedule that they had to be able to win. They had to play Seoul and San Francisco and the Gladiators, who are three of the best teams in the league, and they just could not pull it away. They managed to beat Florida, who, like I said, late in the season was very, very good. Beating Florida at the end of the season was a huge victory for them, right? Obviously, they didn't do everything they could. They didn't win everything they could. But winning against the Florida Mayhem meant a lot for a team that had done pretty well in the later half of the season, but it was just that they struggled too much early on. I think a lot of that came down to Moon, the former head coach. I think you look at what happened after Moon leaves and Packing 10 becomes their head coach. It looked a lot different. They looked a lot better. Moon struggled, didn't do things correctly, didn't do things the way I thought that he probably should have. I mean, he had Kuki playing the main support, the Lucio, at the beginning of the season. He had Kariv, however you pronounce it, playing their damage. The roster didn't make any sense at the beginning of the season, right? What they were doing didn't make a lot of sense. We saw Packington come in, he changed everything. He made it so that this team would be this, they'd play this way, and they looked really, really good, in my opinion. I thought they looked actually like a very solid team. I thought they did a very good job at turning everything around late in the season. Packington did a fantastic job as head coach. And that's why he's now their official head coach. This team definitely should make some changes. They should add some more players. I think they should add another DPS player. They should probably add another main tank player and add someone in the support line or two players in the support line, whatever they feel like they need to do. Obviously, money is a thing that teams have to worry about, so I can say every team should have 12 players on their team, and that's not always necessarily true. But I think there's definitely some things that they should look to add to bolster this team, to make this team a lot better. But I do think this team is in a very good spot going forward. They're in a tough division. They're in the same division that the Dallas Fuel are in, where they're in the same division as the Gladiators and the Titans and the Shock. So some very good teams in this division. But this is a team that looked very good late in the season. They were not as good as I think a lot of people would have liked or would have expected from them, but they definitely improved a lot. I thought that their teamwork and coordination was a lot better with Fact Fiction in the main tank role. Obviously, with Custa in the main support role, this team had a much more clear leader. This is a good team. There's no other way to really put it. But they just fell flat too much in those map fives early in the season and as the season progressed. They had so many map fives early in the season. They went against New York. I think they went to map five against Hangzhou. Like, they had so many map fives at the beginning of the season. They had that map five against Seoul that they lost to in stage 4. That, they win one of those map fives anywhere during the beginning of the season, they're a playoff team, right? I think if you see this roster that we saw, if we saw Custa go back to the main support role earlier in the season, obviously you had this trade that they were originally going to make with the Boston Uprising that then fell through, and this whole thing, and obviously things changed when they had the Florida Mayhem trade. But I think they make a couple changes early in the season, mainly Custa in the main support role. This is a team that I think is winning at least one game in stage 1. And if they win one game in stage 1, they're a playoff team at the end of the season. Like, that's how big they were, and that's how close they were to being a playoff team. But they ultimately fell flat, and that is why I have them at number 11, as they were unable to pull off the wins when they needed them early in the season. I'm interested to see where they go for the 2020 season and how they play, but for now, they sit at 11 in my power rankings. So that is everything for part 1. I will show you the list of 20 through 11 right now for the end of the video, but that is everything. If you're excited for part 2, that will be coming out on Monday, so stay tuned for that. I know this video is a little long. I'm going to try to make part 1 a little bit shorter, but I can't guarantee that will happen. If you enjoyed this video and want to discuss anything about it, if you disagree with me, you agree with me, whatever, I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. But please, if you did enjoy, consider liking and subscribing, as it does help out a lot with the channel. But I am going to get out of here. That is the end of this video. If you want to see part 2, like I said, that'll come out on Monday. But I am officially going to get out of here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.